3 years ago, the man I loved, the man I was supposed to spend my life with, left me a week before our wedding. He left me with 200 custom-printed invitations, a non-refundable venue deposit, and a single, soul-destroying reason. He was ashamed of my fat body. The man sobbing on my doorstep this morning, his life in shambles, begging me to just let him explain. That's him. Hi everyone. For those of you who are new here, I'm Clara, and I'm 29 years old. The woman you see today, a homeowner, a senior project manager, a marathon runner, was built from the wreckage of a girl who once believed her entire value was tied to being chosen by a man. The story I'm about to share is the blueprint of that demolition and the foundation of my reconstruction. This is, without a doubt, the most painful secret I've ever had to keep. Seriously. For 3 years I couldn't even say the words out loud. He called off the wedding. It felt like admitting a failure so monumental, so public, that I would simply evaporate from the shame of it. It wasn't just a breakup. It was a public execution of my worth. He didn't just reject me. He rejected me as a bride, as a wife, as a partner worthy of standing next to him in front of everyone we knew. He announced to the world, and to me, that my body made me unworthy of the most basic promise of love and commitment. That kind of humiliation. Oh my gosh, it's a special kind of poison. It rewrites your own history. You look back at every happy memory, every I love you, every shared laugh, and you see it all through the new horrifying lens of his final judgment. You start to question everything. Was any of it real? Or was I just a before picture in his mind? A project he eventually gave up on? You ask yourself, just because I'm fat, do I deserve to have my heart shattered so publicly? Do I deserve to be left with the burning shame of calling every guest, every vendor, to explain the inexplicable? For a long time, my answer to those questions was a quiet, shame-filled yes. I internalized his verdict. I hid from my friends. I buried myself in work. I accepted that I was flawed, that I was the problem, and that my body was a barrier to the happiness everyone else seemed to find so easily. But this isn't a story about how a man broke me. This is the story of what I did after he left me for dead. It's about the moment I stopped crying and started fighting. It's about realizing that the life I had been planning wasn't my own. It was a shared dream that depended entirely on his approval. And when he took his approval away, he inadvertently gave me something far more valuable. The chance to build a life that was entirely unshakably my own. This is the story of how I stopped trying to be the perfect wife and started becoming the most powerful version of myself. The journey was 3 years of grit and solitude. It was 3 years of sweat, tears, and spreadsheets. It was a long, lonely, uphill battle fought in the dark while the rest of the world slept. There were countless times I wanted to quit, to sink back into the comfortable misery of my old life. But the woman I was becoming refused to let the girl I used to be die in vain. The anger I felt that day, it wasn't a flash fire. It was a slow-burning nuclear core of energy that fueled me for 1,095 days. I know someone listening right now knows this exact pain. The gut-wrenching betrayal of being deemed not good enough by the one person who was supposed to be your biggest champion. The public shame of a future that vanishes overnight. I see you. I feel you. And I'm telling you this so you know that the end of that story is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your war. Before I take you back to that time, to the life I so lovingly built on a foundation of lies, I need to ask you for your support. If this story, even just the introduction, is resonating with that tender, bruised part of your heart, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Each time you do, you send a signal to me and to everyone else in our community that our stories of survival matter. It gives me the courage to walk back onto that battlefield and show you exactly what happened. Okay. Are you ready? Let's rewind. Let's go back to a girl named Clara who thought her happily ever after was already written. Our story, or rather the tragicomedy that I thought was our love story, begins 4 years ago, on a crisp autumn evening. I was living a life that I would describe as contentedly beige. I had a stable, if uninspiring, job as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized accounting firm. My days were a predictable rhythm of scheduling meetings, formatting reports, and making sure the coffee machine was never empty. It wasn't a career, it was a job. It paid the bills for my small but sunny apartment, an apartment I had filled with cozy blankets, overstuffed pillows, and the comforting aroma of whatever I was baking that week. Food was my art form, my joy, my way of showing love. I wasn't a stress eater, I was a happiness eater. A good day at work called for baking a batch of gooey chocolate chip cookies. A friend's promotion warranted a celebratory lasagna. My love for food and my genetic makeup, a gift from a long line of sturdy Eastern European women, meant that I had always been soft, curvy, a big girl. It was simply a fact of my existence, like my brown hair or my hazel eyes. I didn't love it, but I had mostly made peace with it. It was just me. I met David at a company-mandated team-building event, one of those awkward corporate picnics where everyone makes stilted conversation over lukewarm hot dog. I was manning the dessert table, proudly arranging the lemon meringue pie I'd baked, when he walked up. He was a rising star in the sales department, charming, handsome in a clean-cut, trustworthy way, with a smile that could disarm a hostile client or, apparently, a shy admin assistant. He didn't just grab a slice of pie and walk away. He stayed. He asked me about the recipe. He told me it was the best pie he'd ever tasted, better than his own mother's. And he said it with a sincerity that made my cheeks flush. He didn't look at me like I was just the fat girl at the dessert table. He looked at me like I was a creator, an artist. He saw me. Or so I believe. Our relationship was a whirlwind. David was everything I thought I wanted. He was ambitious, but he was also attentive. He'd leave little notes on my car windshield. He'd surprise me with tickets to a play he knew I wanted to see. He loved my cooking, celebrated my nurturing spirit. "You make everything feel like home, Clara," he'd say, pulling me into a hug. With him, my contentment bloomed into genuine technicolor happiness. And yes, being in a happy, stable relationship, I gained some weight. The happy weight, as they call it. We'd spend our weekends exploring new restaurants or staying in, cooking elaborate meals together. Food was our shared language of comfort and celebration. It never felt like an issue. David would affectionately call me his cuddle bug, and I'd feel safe and cherished. It never occurred to me to see it as anything else. I didn't see the subtle ways he was cataloging my body. I didn't notice that his love was conditional, that I was on a sort of probation I knew nothing about. Our families loved us together. My parents were thrilled I'd found such a solid, dependable man. And David's family, particularly his mother, Eleanor, seemed to adore me. Eleanor was a perfectly preserved, elegant woman who chaired 3 different charities and whose home looked like a magazine spread. She was intimidating, but she was always warm to me. "David has never been happier, Clara," she'd tell me, squeezing my hand. "You're such a good grounding influence on him." I mistook her approval for acceptance. I didn't realize that to her. I was a temporary, grounding phase before he moved on to someone more appropriate. And here, I need to introduce my key supporter. The person who, without knowing it, planted a seed that would one day save my life. Her name was Isabel, and she was the head of the IT department at my accounting firm. She was in her late 50s, sharp as a tack, with a no-nonsense attitude and a wardrobe of impeccably tailored pantsuits. She was formidable. Most people were terrified of her, but Isabel had a soft spot for me. She saw something past the quiet, efficient admin assistant. She noticed that I was the one who could always solve complex scheduling conflicts, the one who could untangle a convoluted expense report in minutes. I had a mind for logic, for systems, for seeing the patterns that others missed. One afternoon, I was struggling with a particularly nasty bit of spreadsheet formatting. I had been at it for an hour, my frustration mounting. Isabel walked past my desk, glanced at my screen, and stopped. "You're trying to brute force it," she said, her voice crisp. "There's a more elegant solution." She leaned over, her fingers flying across my keyboard, typing in a string of commands and functions that looked like a foreign language to me. In 30 seconds, the problem was solved. The spreadsheet was perfect. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "How did you do that?" She gave me a rare, small smile. "It's just logic, Clara. A different language for solving puzzles." She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "You have a good brain, a logical brain. You're wasted here making coffee and booking flights." She tapped my desk with a single, manicured finger. "Your mind is your biggest asset. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." The comment was so out of the blue, so direct, that it stunned me. No one had ever complimented my brain before. They complimented my kindness, my baking, my sweet nature. Isabel was the first person to see my intelligence as my primary, most valuable feature. I mumbled a thank you, flustered, and she just nodded and walked away. The comment stuck with me, a strange and precious little stone in my pocket. I didn't know then that her words would become my lifeline. A year and a half into our relationship, David proposed. It was on a trip to the coast, on a windswept bluff overlooking the ocean at sunset. It was cinematic. It was perfect. I said yes through a flood of happy tears. We were getting married. My quiet, beige life was finally turning into a grand, sweeping romance. We spent the next year planning. A year of joy and excitement. We booked a beautiful rustic barn for the venue. We tasted cakes. We argued playfully over invitation fonts. I was in heaven. The wedding was the ultimate validation of my life, of our love. It was proof that the fat girl could get the fairy tale ending too. The first crack in my perfect world appeared about 6 months before the wedding. It was subtle. We were at his parents' house for dinner. Eleanor, his mother, was showing me photos from David's cousin's recent wedding. "Doesn't she look exquisite?" Eleanor said, pointing to a photo of a painfully thin bride in a mermaid-style gown. "She worked so hard before the wedding. Personal trainer, a nutritionist. She was so disciplined. It really paid off. A wedding is a bride's debut, after all. You want to present the best version of yourself." She looked at me, a bright, tight smile on her face. "I'm sure you have a plan too, dear." It wasn't a question. It was a command. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. I glanced at David, hoping he would defend me, say something like, "Mom, Clara is beautiful just as she is." He didn't. He just gave a short, nervous laugh and said, "Of course she does, Mom. We're on it. Team effort." He thought he was smoothing things over, creating a united front. But what I heard was, "Yes, she's a problem, but don't worry, I'm handling it." It was the first time I felt like we weren't a team. I felt like I was his project, and his mother was the lead investor, checking in on her returns. From that day on, things changed. The pressure, once subtle, became overt. It was always framed as our goal or our health journey. He'd buy me a Fitbit and set up competitions. He'd replace the ice cream in the freezer with frozen yogurt. He'd suggest we go for a run instead of to the movies. Our home, once a haven of comfort, started to feel like a training camp. And I, the new recruit, was failing. I tried to be the good sport. I tried to be the partner he wanted. But every salad felt like a punishment. Every workout a reminder of my inadequacy. And the more I tried and failed to live up to his unspoken standards, the more a quiet, frustrated resentment began to build in him. The man I loved was still there, but he was slowly being replaced by a disappointed, impatient coach. And I, like a fool, kept trying to win the approval of a man who had already decided I wasn't good enough, walking step by step towards the day he would finally, officially, call the game. The final 6 months before the wedding were not a joyful countdown. They were a slow, agonizing march toward a cliff I couldn't see. The subtle pressure from David and his mother had morphed into a suffocating, all-encompassing fog of expectation. Our wedding, which had once been a symbol of our love, was now a project with a single terrifying key performance indicator. Every conversation seemed to circle back to it. David became an expert in the art of the backhanded compliment. "You look great today, honey," he'd say. "That black dress is so slimming." Or after a week where I'd managed to lose a couple of pounds, he'd be effusively affectionate, his love feeling like a reward for good behavior. But if the scale went up, or if I dared to bake a pie, a chilly distance would settle between us. He wouldn't say anything directly. He'd just become quiet, his disappointment a palpable presence in the room. It was a masterful campaign of psychological warfare, and I, desperate for his approval, was its willing victim. Our apartment, my cozy nest, started to feel like a showroom. Eleanor, his mother, would pop by unannounced with paint swatches or fabric samples, making suggestions for how we could elevate the space. Each suggestion felt like a critique of me, of my taste, of my comfortable, unpretentious life. I started to see my beloved lumpy couch and colorful throw pillows through her eyes. They were frumpy, unsophisticated, just like me. The focal point of this entire campaign was, of course, the wedding dress. I had found a beautiful, romantic A-line gown at a small, lovely boutique. The owner was kind. The dress fit beautifully. And when I put it on, I felt a flicker of the bridal magic I so desperately crave. I felt beautiful. I made the mistake of showing a picture to Eleanor. She peered at it through her perfectly styled reading glasses, her lips pursed. "It's sweet, dear," she said, the word sweet landing like a death sentence. "Very safe. It certainly gives you a nice shape." The implication was clear. The dress was doing a good job of hiding my flaws. "But David is on such a spectacular career path," she continued, her voice like smooth, cold silk. "This wedding is a statement. It's his debut as a family man in a way. You want a dress that says power couple, not just comfortable." That night, David brought it up. "Mom has a point, you know," he said gently, as if breaking bad news. "She knows this world. Maybe we should keep looking for something a bit more show-stopping." And just like that, the one piece of the wedding that had felt truly mine was taken from me. My beautiful, comfortable, safe dress was deemed not good enough. Because I was not good enough. So the hunt began again. But this time, it wasn't fun. It was a series of humiliating ordeals in high-end boutiques where stick-thin consultants would look me up and down with pitying eyes and say, "We can order that in your size, of course, but the sample won't give you a true idea." Each ill-fitting sample dress was another piece of evidence in the trial against my body, and David, my fiancé, was no longer my partner. He was the prosecuting attorney, standing by silently as the evidence mounted, his disappointment growing with each failed zipper. We finally settled on a dress. It was an Eleanor-approved gown from a designer boutique, a structured, strapless satin number that was far more severe and formal than my original choice. It was a beautiful dress, but it didn't feel like me. It felt like a costume for the woman they wanted me to be. When I stood in it, I felt like I was playing a part. The seamstress took my measurements, her tape measure feeling like it was cataloging my every failure. "We will need several fittings," she said, her tone grim. "There is a lot of structure to consider." The final month before the wedding was a pressure cooker. My days at the accounting firm were the only respite, a place where I was just Clara, the efficient admin. But even there the wedding loomed. My cubicle was decorated with well wishes. People would ask excitedly, "Are you getting nervous? You must be so thrilled." And I would smile and nod, my stomach churning with a toxic cocktail of anxiety and dread. I felt like a fraud. Isabel, the head of it, was the only one who seemed to see through it. She found me in the break room one afternoon, staring blankly at a sad-looking vending machine salad. I had a final dress fitting that evening, and I hadn't eaten all day. terrified the dress wouldn't zip. "You look like you're heading to a funeral, not a wedding," Isabel said bluntly, leaning against the counter. I tried to force a smile. "Just pre-wedding jitters." She looked at me, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Jitters are one thing. This is something else. You look haunted, Clara." She paused. "Remember what I told you. Your brain is your biggest asset. Don't let anyone, and I mean anyone, make you feel like your value lies anywhere else." She didn't say anything more. She just gave my shoulder a brief firm squeeze and walked away, leaving me with her words hanging in the air. Her kindness was so unexpected, so piercing, that it almost made me cry. The final fitting was a nightmare. The dress was tight. Too tight. The seamstress, a stern woman with pins in her mouth, clucked her tongue. "You have not lost the weight we discussed," she said, her voice accusatory. David, who had insisted on coming, stood by the mirror, his face a mask of stone-cold disappointment. "Can't you let it out?" he asked the seamstress, his voice tight with frustration. He wasn't even looking at me anymore. He was looking at my reflection, at the problem that needed to be solved. "There is no more to let out," the seamstress declared. "This is it." I stood there, encased in satin, struggling to breathe, the judgmental eyes of the seamstress and the disappointed eyes of my fiancé boring into me. I felt a wave of dizziness. In that moment, I hated the dress. I hated the wedding. And for the first time, a tiny, treasonous flicker of hatred for David sparked in my heart. The week of the wedding arrived. The house was filled with flowers and gifts. My family was flying in. The final checks had been sent to the vendors. We were in the home stretch. David was tense and distant, moving through the motions with a brittle cheerfulness that didn't reach his eyes. He was drinking more than usual. Every night, he'd have 2 or 3 glasses of whiskey, staring at the TV, a million miles away. The silence between us was deafening. The breaking point came on a Tuesday 5 days before the wedding. It was my bachelorette party, a small affair with my 2 bridesmaids and a few close friends from work. They had planned a spa day, a quiet, relaxing celebration. But I couldn't relax. I felt like a ghost, just going through the motions. The sound of their happy chatter about the wedding, about my future, was like nails on a chalkboard. After the spa, we went for an early dinner. I ordered a salad, but my friend Sarah insisted we all share a dessert. A decadent chocolate lava cake. "You have to," she laughed. "It's your last hurrah." So, I had a few bites. It was delicious. And for a moment, I felt a flicker of my old self, the girl who found joy in a shared meal. I came home around 9 o'clock, feeling a little lighter. The apartment was dark. David was supposed to be at his bachelor party, a steak dinner with his groomsmen. I assumed he was still out. I walked into the living room, and my blood ran cold. He was there, sitting on the couch in the dark, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the coffee table in front of him. And spread out all around him, like a terrible tarot reading, were our wedding photos. Not the actual photos, but the proofs from our engagement shoot. Photos of us, smiling, happy, in love. Photos of a me that was 20 pounds heavier than I was now, but 100 times happier. "David?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What's wrong? Why are you here?" He didn't look at me. He just picked up a photo, the one of us laughing on the beach, and stared at it. "I was at dinner with the guys," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "And Rob was showing pictures from his brother's wedding. And his wife, she looked like a model, Clara. An actual model." He tossed the photo onto the table, and they were all talking about the wedding, about our wedding. They were saying how lucky I am, how you're so sweet, so good for me. He finally looked up at me, and his eyes were filled with a terrifying, swimming mixture of self-pity and pure, unadulterated rage. "They don't see it," he whispered. "They don't see what I see. What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart beginning to pound, a cold dread seeping into my bones. He stood up, swaying slightly. He walked over to me, and for a second I thought he was going to hug me. Instead, he reached out and grabbed my arm. My soft, fleshy upper arm. He squeezed, his fingers digging in, and he looked down at it with utter disgust. "I'm talking about this," he hissed, his voice thick with whiskey and contempt. "This is what I see. This is what everyone is going to see when you walk down that aisle. They're not going to see a beautiful bride. They're going to see the fat girl that David, poor, noble David, was nice enough to marry." I froze. My heart didn't just sink, it stopped. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. His words were a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. "I can't do it, Clara," he said, his voice breaking, tears of self-pity welling in his eyes. "I can't stand up there. I can't look out at all those people, at my parents, at my boss, and see them all thinking the same thing. I can't spend the rest of my life making excuses. I can't be the guy who married the fat girl." He let go of my arm, as if it were on fire, and stumbled back. "I've tried," he wept. "God, I've tried to help you. I've tried to be supportive, but you won't change. You just don't have the discipline." I stared at him, my mind a screaming void. This was it. This was the monster that had been living behind his kind smile all along. The man I loved was gone, and in his place was this cruel, weak stranger, crying not for me, but for himself, crying for the perfect life with the perfect wife that my imperfect body was denying him. The full weight of his betrayal, of his mother's condescension, of the entire last year of my life, crashed down on me in that one horrific moment. I had starved myself, exhausted myself, contorted myself into a shape I thought would please him, and it still wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "So that's it?" I finally whispered, my voice a dry, rasping sound I didn't recognize. "You're calling off the wedding? 5 days before?" He couldn't even look at me. He just nodded, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. It's too much. My parents will handle the calls. It's better this way. A clean break. A clean break." He said it like he was performing a mercy, like he was a surgeon amputating a diseased limb. And I was the disease. He turned and walked into the bedroom, closing the door behind him, leaving me standing alone in the living room with the ghosts of our happy memories scattered at my feet. The pain was so vast, so absolute, it was almost sublime. It was a perfect, crystalline agony. I felt my knees buckle, and I collapsed onto the floor, a silent, guttural scream tearing through my soul, but making no sound. The fairy tale was over. The beautiful castle we had built was a pile of rubble, and I was buried alive underneath it. I don't know how long I lay on the floor of our living room. It could have been 10 minutes or 10 hours. Time had dissolved into a thick, syrupy agony. The world outside the apartment, the city, the cars, the people, had ceased to exist. My universe was the 4 walls of that room, the scent of whiskey in the air, and the echo of his final annihilating words. "I can't be the guy who married the fat girl." Every happy memory I had of us was now replaying in my mind, but twisted and corrupted, like a beautiful song played backwards. The romantic proposal on the cliff, not a declaration of love, but the start of a 1-year probation period. The nights we spent cooking together, not shared joy, but him assessing his failing project. Every "I love you" was now a lie, every hug a measurement, every kiss a judgment. The man I had loved didn't exist. I had been engaged to a ghost, a projection of my own hopes, while the real man was waiting in the wings, sharpening his knives. At some point, the bedroom door opened. I didn't look up. I heard him moving around, the sound of a suitcase being packed. Then his footsteps approached. I felt his shadow fall over me. "Clara," he said, his voice now sober and cold, stripped of the maudlin self-pity from before. "I'm going to my parents' place, my mom. She'll call your mom in the morning. They'll handle the announcements." He paused, waiting for me to say something, to scream, to cry, to beg. I did nothing. I just lay there, a casualty on the battlefield he had created. "It's for the best," he said, the words a final, pathetic attempt at justifying his own cowardice. Then I heard his footsteps walk away. The front door opened and closed with a soft, final click. And then, silence. A silence so profound, so absolute, it felt like the end of the world. He was gone. The shock held me paralyzed for what felt like an eternity. And then, slowly, a new feeling began to seep into the numbness. It started as a tiny hot spark deep in my belly. It was a feeling I hadn't allowed myself to feel for the entire duration of our relationship. It was pure, undiluted, righteous rage. How dare he? The thought was a silent scream. How dare he stand in judgment of me? How dare he make me feel worthless? How dare he appoint himself the arbiter of who deserves love, who deserves a wedding, who deserves happiness? The rage was a fire, and it began to burn away the fog of my grief. It burned away the shame. It burned away the years of quiet, demure people-pleasing. I pushed myself up from the floor, my movements stiff and clumsy. I walked into the bathroom and looked at my reflection in the mirror, expecting to see a broken, shattered mess. And I did. My face was pale, my eyes were red and swollen. I was a wreck. But for the first time, I looked into those eyes, and I didn't see weakness. I saw a survivor. I saw the flicker of a fire that David, in all his pathetic cruelty, had just accidentally ignited. That was my awakening. It wasn't a gentle dawn. It was a detonation. I realized in that moment that David hadn't just taken away our wedding. He had taken away the life I thought I was supposed to live. And in its place he had left a terrifying, gaping void. A void I could either fall into forever, or I could choose to fill with something else. Something of my own making. "No more," I whispered to the broken woman in the mirror. "No more." My war began that night. It wasn't a war against David. He was already a casualty of his own weakness. My war was against the girl I had been, the girl who had outsourced her self-worth, the girl who had believed that being chosen was the ultimate prize. My goal was not to win him back. Oh my gosh, never. My goal was to build a life so full, so strong, and so completely, utterly mine, that the memory of him would have no place to live. I didn't sleep. I began to move. My grief and rage transformed into a cold, methodical energy. I walked through the apartment, our home, and it now felt like a foreign country. I started making lists. Not emotional lists of pros and cons, but practical, logistical lists. A battle plan. Front 1. The demolition. I had to dismantle the life we had built together, quickly and ruthlessly. Front 2. The foundation. I had to find a new place to live and secure my finances. Front 3. The reconstruction. This was the long game. This was about rebuilding my body, my career, and my soul from the ground up. The next morning, the calls began. First, my mother, her voice a mixture of hysteria and disbelief, after speaking with Eleanor. I was calm. I told her, "Mom, it's over. I'm okay. Please, just handle our side of the family. Tell them the wedding is off. Don't give a reason." Then came the flood of texts from my bridesmaids, from friends. To all of them I sent the same, simple, brutal message. "The wedding is off. I'm okay, but I can't talk right now. I'll explain when I can." I turned off my phone. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their well-meaning advice. I needed to be alone in my war room. For the next 72 hours I was a machine. I systematically dismantled our life. I called every vendor, the caterer, the florist, the band, and cancelled, absorbing the lost deposits like battle wounds. I packed every single thing that belonged to David into boxes. His clothes, his books, his stupid whiskey glasses. I piled them by the front door. Then I packed my own things. I was ruthless. Every item that reminded me of him, every gift, every photo, went into a garbage bag. It was a cleansing, a purge. The hardest thing to pack was the wedding dress. My statement dress. I pulled it out of its pristine garment bag. I looked at the cold, unforgiving satin. It was the symbol of my failure, of my humiliation. I had a wild momentary urge to take a pair of scissors and shred it to ribbons. But then another, colder, more satisfying idea came to me. I packed it carefully back into its bag. Revenge, I was beginning to learn, was a dish best served cold, and with a devastating financial impact. I found a new apartment online, a small one-bedroom in a completely different neighborhood. I paid the deposit with my emergency savings. I hired movers. By the end of the week, I was gone. I left the apartment key on the counter, next to the mountain of his boxed-up life, and a single itemized bill for my half of all the lost wedding deposits, and the full cost of the wedding dress. I didn't expect to ever see the money. The bill wasn't about money. It was a statement. This is what your cowardice cost. Moving into my new, empty apartment was the first time the full weight of my solitude hit me. The adrenaline wore off, and the grief came back in a tidal wave. I spent the first weekend in a cocoon of blankets, crying until I was dehydrated. I let myself feel it all. The pain, the shame, the loneliness. I let it wash over me and through me. And by Sunday night, I was done. The mourning period was over. On Monday morning, the reconstruction would begin. The first step was my body. David's obsession with my weight had made me hate my body, hate exercise, hate food. I needed to reclaim it. But I wasn't going to a gym. I wasn't going on a diet. I decided to run. It was awful at first. I could barely run for 30 seconds without my lungs feeling like they were on fire. My body felt heavy, clumsy. Every step was a struggle. But I kept going. I ran in the dark, early mornings, before the city was awake. The physical pain was a relief from the emotional pain. And slowly, something began to change. I started to focus on what my body could do. Not just what it looked like. It could get me to the end of the block. It could get me through a full minute of running. It could get me a whole mile. Every small victory was a brick in my new foundation. Running became my meditation, my therapy, my proof that I could endure discomfort and come out stronger. The second step was my career. Isabel's words came back to me. You have a good brain. You're wasted here. She was right. My job as an admin was a cage, a comfortable, beige cage. I was done with beige. I enrolled in night classes at the local community college. I started with a course in project management, and it was like a light went on in my brain. The same skills I used to untangle spreadsheets and manage schedules were the foundation for a real powerful career. I was good at it. I loved the logic, the systems, the satisfaction of taking a complex problem and breaking it down into a clean, efficient solution. My life fell into a new, relentless rhythm. Wake up at 5 a.m., run. Go to my boring day job, where I would perform my duties perfectly, and then secretly study for my classes during my lunch break. Head to my night class. Come home, eat a simple, nourishing meal, study until my eyes burned, and then collapse into bed. It was a lonely, monastic existence. But I wasn't lonely. I was focused. I was building. The years began to blur together. 1 year, then 2. I got my project management certification. I started looking for new jobs. I faced rejection. I was told I didn't have enough experience. But the girl who survived being left a week before her wedding was not afraid of a few no's. She was persistent. She was relentless. I finally got a break. A junior project manager position at a small, up-and-coming architecture firm. It was a huge pay cut, a massive risk. But it was a chance. I took it. And I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. I was the first one in the office, the last one to leave. I learned everything I could about architecture, about construction, about budgets and timelines. I used my brain, my logic, my ability to see patterns, and I started to climb. My body was transforming too. The running had become a passion. I ran a 5K and then a 10K, then a half marathon. I crossed the finish line of my first half marathon, my body screaming, tears of pure, unadulterated triumph streaming down my face. I wasn't running from my past anymore. I was running toward my future. The weight loss was significant, a natural consequence of years of training, but it was the least important part of the change. The real change was the strength I felt in my legs, the power in my lungs, the quiet, unshakable confidence that came from knowing I could push my body past its limits, and not just survive, but thrive. After 3 years, my life was unrecognizable. I was no longer a junior. I was a senior project manager at one of the fastest-growing firms in the city, managing multi-million-dollar construction projects. I had saved my money with the same ferocious discipline I applied to my running and my work. And with the help of a first-time homebuyers program, I had just closed on my own place, a small condo with a balcony that got the morning sun. It had been 1095 days since the night he left. 1095 days of fighting, of building, of becoming. I had done it. I had built a life so full, so strong, and so completely mine that the memory of David was like a faded photograph from a stranger's life. I had won the war. And that's when he showed up. It was a Saturday morning. I was in my happy place, my sun-drenched, minimalist new home, a mug of freshly brewed coffee in my hand. I had just gotten back from a 10-mile run, my body pleasantly tired, my mind clear and calm. I was looking over the blueprints for a new downtown high-rise project, a project I was leading. Life was good. It was quiet. It was orderly. It was entirely mine. And then the buzzer rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked over to the intercom, a flicker of annoyance in my chest. Hello? There was a pause, then a voice, hesitant and broken, crackled through the speaker. A voice I hadn't heard in 3 years, but one that was seared into my memory like a cattle brand. Clara? It's David. My blood ran cold. My coffee mug felt impossibly heavy in my hand. For a split second, the world tilted, and I was back on that living room floor, the smell of whiskey in the air. A wave of pure visceral panic washed over me. The old Clara, the ghost of the girl I used to be, wanted to run and hide. She wanted to pretend she wasn't home. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a woman who had run marathons. I was a woman who managed construction crews of burly men who initially doubted her and now respected her. I was a woman who had faced down her own demons in the dark, every single morning for 3 years. I was not afraid of this ghost. I took a deep breath, my heart rate steadying, the marathon runner's calm taking over. I pressed the talk button. What do you want, David? My voice was colder than I expected, devoid of any emotion. Please, he choked out, and the sound was so pathetic, so utterly broken it was jarring. I need to talk to you. Please, Clara. Just for 5 minutes. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was a morbid curiosity. Maybe it was a desire to see the final chapter of the story with my own eyes. I pressed the entry button. I heard the click of the front gate unlocking downstairs. And then I waited, my back straight, my coffee mug placed firmly on the counter, my home, my fortress, at my back. I watched him on the small security camera screen as he walked through the lobby. He was a stranger. The confident, charming, put-together man I had known was gone. The man shuffling toward the elevator was a wreck. His expensive suit was rumpled and ill-fitting, hanging off a frame that was both thinner and somehow puffier. His face was pale and unshaven, with dark, hollowed-out circles under his eyes. He looked defeated. When he knocked on my door, It was a soft, hesitant rap, the knock of a beggar, not a conqueror. I opened the door. He stood there on my doorstep, and his jaw literally fell open. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a confusion so profound it was almost comical. He was looking at me, but he wasn't seeing me. He was seeing a stranger. He was seeing a woman with a sharp bob, a lean, athletic build honed by thousands of miles of running, and eyes that held a calm, unshakable confidence he had never seen before. He was seeing the physical manifestation of a life lived entirely without him. "Clara?" he whispered, as if seeing a ghost. "Oh my God, you look." He couldn't finish the sentence. The words amazing or different or thin seemed to die on his lips, inadequate for the chasm of change that stood before him. "What do you want, David?" I repeated, my voice even, my body blocking the entrance to my home. He was not welcome here. This was a sacred space. He seemed to snap out of his trance, the raw desperation returning to his face. I'm so sorry to just show up like this," he stammered, wringing his hands. "I know I have no right, but I didn't know who else to turn to. I'm in trouble, Clara. Real trouble." And then it all came tumbling out. A pathetic, sordid confession on my doormat. His life had imploded. After I left, his perfect life plan had gone off the rails. He had quickly started dating a woman his mother had approved of. A show-stopping girl, a thin blonde lawyer from a good family. They got engaged within 6 months. They had the big, flashy wedding he had always wanted, the one I wasn't good enough for. But the perfect wife came with a perfect lifestyle, one he couldn't afford. He started cutting corners at work to boost his sales commissions. He got caught. Vian. He lost his job, the spectacular career his mother was so proud of. His new wife, whose love was apparently just as conditional as his own, left him the moment the money dried up, taking most of what was left in a vicious divorce. He was broke. He was about to be evicted from his apartment, and he was drowning in legal fees. "I lost everything," he wept, actual tears streaming down his pale, stubbled cheeks. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading, filled with a desperate, deluded hope. "And all I could think about was you. I was so stupid, Clara. I was an idiot. I was a coward. You were the only good thing in my life, and I threw it away because I was weak, and I was scared, and I listened to my mother." He took a step forward, his hand reaching for me. "But I see you now," he said, his voice thick with a sudden, desperate fervor. "And I see that you're okay. You're more than okay. You're incredible, and it gives me hope. Maybe we can, I don't know, talk. Start over? I've changed, Clara. I see what's important now." I stared at him. I stared at this broken, pathetic man crying on my doorstep, offering me the wreckage of his life as if it were a prize. And I felt nothing. No anger. No hatred. No satisfaction. No pity. Just nothing. A vast, calm, quiet emptiness. He was a stranger telling me a sad story that had absolutely nothing to do with me. The revenge I had fantasized about in my darkest moments, seeing him on his knees, begging for my forgiveness, was happening right now. And it was utterly, completely hollow, because his downfall had nothing to do with me. It was the natural consequence of his own flawed character. His life had fallen apart not because he had lost me, but because he was a weak, superficial man who had built his world on a foundation of sand. And my success? My success had nothing to do with him either. I hadn't built this life to show him, to prove him wrong, or to get some kind of petty revenge. I had built it for me. I had run those miles for me. I had earned that career for me. I had built this home for me. My life was not a reaction to his rejection. It was a creation of my own strength. In that moment, I was truly, finally, free. I looked at him, at the man who had tried to be the architect of my life, and I gave him a calm, serene smile. "There is no us, David," I said, my voice gentle but firm as steel. "That man and that woman, They don't exist anymore. You destroyed them, and I thank you for it." He stared at me, his tear-filled eyes wide with confusion. "Thank me? Yes," I said. "You leaving was the single best thing that ever happened to me. You thought you were calling off a wedding, but what you actually did was set me free. You freed me from a life of trying to be small enough to fit into your narrow, pathetic world. You forced me to build my own. So, thank you. But my world doesn't have a place for you in it." I took a step back and began to close the door. "Wait," he cried out, his voice cracking. "Clara, please. I have nowhere to go. I need some money. Just a loan. To get back on my feet." And there it was. The final, pathetic truth. He wasn't here for forgiveness. He wasn't here for a second chance. He was here because he was a user, and he had run out of people to use, so he had come crawling back to the one person he remembered as being endlessly, foolishly giving. I looked at him one last time, this ghost on my doorstep, and I felt a flicker of something. Not pity for him, but a deep, profound wave of love and gratitude for the woman I had become. The woman who was strong enough to say no. "No, David," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "My assets are not your emergency fund." And I closed the door, shutting it firmly on my past. I leaned against it for a moment, listening to the sound of his fading, pathetic sobs on the other side. Then I turned, walked back to my sun-drenched office, picked up my coffee and my blueprints, and got back to work. My work. My life. My future. Being fat is not a sin. Hiding your light to make someone else feel comfortable in their own darkness is. Giving away your power piece by piece until there is nothing left of you, that is the real tragedy. To anyone watching, to anyone who has ever felt their world crumble because one person withdrew their love, hear me, their departure is not your demolition. It is your liberation. The empty space they leave behind is not a void. It is a construction site. And you alone, are the architect. You get to draw the blueprints. You get to build a life so strong and so beautiful that it will be a fortress no ghost from the past can ever penetrate. I never saw David again. I heard through the grapevine a few months later that he had moved back in with his parents, a grown man living in his childhood bedroom, trying to piece his life back together. I felt a brief, distant sadness. Not for him, but for the profound waste of his potential. He had a chance at a real, loving partnership, and he traded it for the empty approval of others. It's a sad story, but it's his story, not mine. My story was just beginning. My life now, it's full. It's not a fairy tale, because fairy tales are about being rescued. My life is an epic. It's a story I'm writing myself, every single day. I'm still a senior project manager, and I love my job. I still run, not because I'm chasing a smaller size, but because I love the feeling of my own strength, the rhythm of my feet on the pavement, the quiet solitude of the early morning. I bought myself a new metal rack, because the old one was full, and I found love again. But this time, it looks different. It's not the frantic, all-consuming need to be chosen that I had before. It's a calm, steady partnership with a wonderful man, a landscape architect who fell in love with this version of me. The strong, independent, busy woman who doesn't need him, but chooses to share her life with him. He loves my mind, he loves my ambition, and yes, he loves my body, a body that is strong and healthy, but will never ever be a size 2. And he loves my baking. Our home is always filled with the smell of fresh bread, a scent of joy that I have fully reclaimed as my own. Sharing this with you all today, opening up that wound that I kept hidden for so long, has been incredibly healing. For years, the story of my called-off wedding was my deepest shame. But now, telling it to you, here in our community, it feels like my greatest victory. Your presence, your willingness to listen without judgment, is what turns these painful memories from shackles into wings. You give me the courage to fly. That's why this next part is so important. If this story, my story of demolition and reconstruction, has resonated with you in any way, please, I'm asking you to take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And please, hit that notification bell, because this is an ongoing conversation. Every like, every subscription, is another brick in the foundation of this community, making it a stronger and safer place for all of us to share our truth. And now, I want to hear your truth. This is your moment. I want you to go down to the comments and tell me about your reconstruction. What was the moment you stopped mourning the life that was taken from you and started building a new one? Share your own comeback story below. What did you build on your construction site? A new career? A new passion? A new sense of self? I promise you, I read every single comment. Your stories are the blueprints that inspire all of us to keep building. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are the architect. Go build something magnificent. Love you all, your Clara. See you in the next story.